In 1990, the Faroe Islands had just joined UEFA after becoming a member of FIFA 2 years prior. The national team would participate in their first Euro qualifiers for the 1992 edition of the tournament. However, they were at a massive disadvantage as most of the squad was made up of amateur players. The Faroe Islands opener was against Austria, a nation that had just played in the 1990 World Cup, and unfortunately, the game had to be played in Sweden due to the territory not having any suitable football stadium. But despite the odds, the Faroese players held strong through their iron goalkeeper Jens Martin Knudsen. Then in the 61st minute, the unthinkable happened as Torkild Nielsen slotted one past the keeper. At the time, Nielsen was just the clerk and also a 3-time Faroe Islands chess champion, and now he had just scored a goal that would go down in the history books. The Faroe Islands held on till the end to produce one of the most famous upsets in football, and players like Jens Martin Knudsen, who was a part-time forklift driver for a fish factory, became an overnight hero for his incredible shot stopping. This incredible story of overcoming Goliath is now Faroese folklore that has been told to generations after. The Faroese Islands population is just under 53,000, which puts them at a massive disadvantage against nations with millions of footballers. When it comes to living and playing in the Faroe Islands, it takes strength to endure the cold winds and extreme weather. The island's footballers' stubbornness to play hard in these conditions is how they've survived the rough nature of their competition for decades now. But this isn't just limited to the national team. Welcome to Klaksvík, the second largest town in the Faroe Islands. This town is home to just 5,000 people and is a cultural and commercial hub to the islands as a whole. Klaksvík is also considered the fishing capital of the Faroe Islands. However, it is also home to football club Klaksvíkar Íþróttafélag. I got a decent overview of this club from a channel by the name of Faroe Ball. They're a channel that makes videos about football in the Faroe Islands. Now, there's a lot of these types of niche channels, but what I like about this one is the editing is really good. So please, by all means, if you love minnow content, check Faroe Ball out, link in the description. Founded in 1904, Klaksvík is one of the most successful clubs in the country, having won their first league title all the way back in 1942. Their most enriched period was during the mid-20th century when Klaksvík won 13 titles between 1952 and 1972. It wasn't until 19 years later, with the help of goalkeeper Jakob Mikkelsen, that Klaksvík would win the league again. Mikkelsen would go on to make 73 caps for the national team. In the following season, Klaksvík would be granted a spot in the Champions League qualifiers, but lost to Latvian side Skonto 6-1 on aggregate. Klaksvík won their 17th title in 1999 through goal scorers Kurt Murkore and Rogvi Jakobsen. Jakobsen would go on to be the all-time leading goal scorer for the Faroe Islands. He even scored against Italy, which gave way to the nickname Inzaghi Faroese from the Italian media. Into the 2000s though, from the top of the mountain, Klaksvík fell. The club was starting to suffer from financial constraints and was forced to cut expenses. Klaksvík simply couldn't afford wages, and as a consequence, returning key veterans like Mikkelsen and Jakobsen would have to be released at the end of the 2008 season. The squad deteriorated so much that the club was forced to play young locals, and this didn't fare well as Klaksvík relegated at the end of the 2009 season. However, they returned after a year absence and finished 5th in 2011. Then in 2015, head coach Mikael Thomason took over and implemented a new style of play that eventually would see Klaksvík play attractive attacking football. They finished 5th that season, and then in 2016 just missed out on ending their title drought by a single point. Klaksvík did earn a Europa League qualification spot for 2017-18, but unfortunately lost 5-0 on aggregate in the first round. In the 2017 league season, just when you thought the torture was over, Klaksvík lose the title by 5 goals. What the 2018 was a bit of an off-season, but in Europe, Klaksvík was starting to learn from their past mistakes. They got past the first round of Europa League qualifiers for the first time ever. However, celebrations were cut short after losing to Luzern. But at last, the title drought ended as Klaksvík won their 18th title in 2019. Both Johannes Bjartailo and Patrick Johannesson played key roles, scoring half of the team's goals. And with that came the chance to compete in the 2020-21 Champions League season. In the first round, Klaksvík got a free pass after Slovan Bratislava's team had to quarantine due to COVID. It should be mentioned, as this was during COVID, only one leg was being played. The club then played Young Boys in the second round and lost 3-1, sending Klaksvík down to the third round of Europa League qualifiers, where Klaksvík defeated Dinamo Tbilisi emphatically, which meant they were just one match away from playing in a European competition for the first time in their history. This was also the biggest victory for a Faroese team in European club football and was watched by 70% of the Klaksvík population. Unfortunately though, it just wasn't meant to be, as Klaksvík lost to Dundalk 3-1. Klaksvík won the league again in 2021, granting the club a spot in the Champions League qualifiers once again. After falling 3-0 down to Bodo Glimt in the first leg, Klaksvík Klaksvík nearly made an incredible comeback at home, but just fell short. Klaksvík conquered the league again in 2022, but this time they went one step further. They went unbeaten the entire season. However, manager Mikael Thomason at the end of the season was accused of assaulting and threatening a footballer at a nightclub. This resulted in his resignation, or at least I think it did, at the end of the year. And in came Magna Hoseth, who would be given the challenge to bring the Faroese Invincibles to the 2022-23 Champions League. Klaksvík played Hungarian champions Ferencváros, and the first leg saw a 0-0 result at home. Then the return leg, the Faroese champions had the Hungarians fishing out 3 goals in the first half. In the second round, Klaksvík played Swedish champions BK Häcken, and again the Faroese held their opponents to a 0-0 draw at home. The second leg was far more entertaining though. Arni Fredriksberg, who scored 2 in the first round, grabbed an early lead for Klaksvík. Häcken then responded with 2-1 answered in the 24th and 48th minutes respectively, but then Arni shot a laser past the keeper to make it all level. However, Häcken reclaimed the lead in the 105th minute, but then an own goal made the game level again. And after 120 minutes, the game would go to penalties and Klaksvík would prevail in the end. And so, for the first time ever, Klaksvík had made it to the 3rd round of Champions League qualifiers. However, Norwegian champions Molde were ready to end this fairy tale. But Molde made the mistake of underestimating the godly powers of Arni Fredriksberg. He sells frozen pizzas by day, places clubs into the oven by night. Through the sheer force of his quads, he produces Faroe Frenzy. Klaksvík were now just 90 minutes away from advancing to the playoff round. But sadly, this fairy tale doesn't have the happiest of endings. Despite their efforts, Klaksvík would fall to Molde after losing 3-2 in aggregate in extra time. Luckily, history has still been made by this club because they will for the first time be able to participate in a European competition. If they can beat Sheriff Tiraspol, Klaksvík will play in the Europa League. But if they can't, no problem, because Klaksvík will still be in the Conference League. Oftentimes, we as fans of this sport get a little too fixated on the surface level of football, and I'd be lying to myself if I said I wasn't doing the same thing on this channel sometimes. But stories like Klaksvík remind us that this game is far bigger than we could even imagine. So once in a while, see what's going on in some random country that isn't talked about all the time, because sometimes those stories can be more intriguing than even the club you follow right now.
Well, I don't like that story, Great-Grandpa.
But of course, a massive shout out to all our patrons, of course, including Janos Barash, Stin, Miliue009, Adnasir Makalankom, Audipu, Alex Rod, Ulta, Aresan, Carlos Anaya, Daniel Ortiz, Francisco Hernandez, Ilea, Joao Carvalho, Josh Budd, Marco Fujimoto, Miguel Munoz, Return Fire, Rory Burns, Slider Kid, Snifferx, Taco Okafan, Tomicus, Victor, Chris Damasceno, Chris Visconti, Q9 Champs 2022, Dominic Griffin, Emmett Shea, Lewis, Joe Paricio, Lucian von Croix, Michael Niesta, Niche, Patrick Barley, President Pulisic, Rowan Cookie, Sylvia Citrus, Subscribe Nintendetem, Unbroken Persona, and Valencia 14. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow my Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you like, follow my TikTok, trying to get to 20,000 there, and of course you can follow my semi-active Twitch. But until then, I'll see you guys.